In this video I want to show a few ways to use texture maps in ZBrush. Hannah had asked about applying the same kind of planar texture map that we saw applied to these kinds of planes for the nanomesh brush, like with the leaf. For example, just taking, importing something like that, and that applies that to that plane, and then you can make it transparent, and that gives you, a low poly object with a pretty nice texture on it. But she was wondering about applying it to geometry, and we've done that with kind of mixed results. So I want to show you a workflow. I actually talked with Joseph Drust about this, and he reminded me that there are planar maps in ZBrush, so we can use those. Normally we're trying to avoid those kinds of things, but in this case you can actually do some really interesting things with it. So the first thing I've done here is I've got just a plain object that I've lowered down to around, I think, 16 repeats across each direction. And if you look closely, I don't know whether you can see it on the video, but the edge loops, or at least the outer edges of this, are all creased, and I don't want that. I might want to be able to subdivide this thing somewhat. So what I want to do is switch to my Z modeler brush and come over the edge, and I want to set that to crease, and that way when I mouse, or when I want to set the target to edge loop complete, so that I can mouse over an edge on the outside of this thing and hold down Alt and click it, and that'll uncrease all the edges on the outside. Let's do one up here at the top and one down here at the bottom. Again, I'm holding Alt when I click these so that it takes away that crease. That way, when you subdivide this thing, it smooths those edges, whereas if they were creased, it wouldn't. Alright, so now that I've got that, I want to switch. I want to give this thing some thickened geometry, so I'm going to mouse over one of the polygons, again hold down my space bar and do Q mesh. In this case I want to do a flat island because I want to do the whole thing here. So I'm just going to kind of turn around to the side here so I can look at it and Q mesh it out till it looks like it's about square. If it's not, then just try it again. And let's just I'm just going to click it again one more time just to do that, so that I have kind of a double thickness there. And you'll notice that if we try to apply, say, that texture to this thing now, we're probably going to get some very odd results. Yeah, it's not even going to show up because this thing has no UV coordinates on it, so it doesn't know what to do with it. So let's undo that, and let's give it some UV coordinates. The way I tend to do things like this is you can do it in several different ways. You can do, depending on how much of this thing is going to be seen, you may want to wrap it or unwrap it you may want to unwrap it in different ways. If you're going to be seeing the edges a lot, I'd probably leave it like it is, where you've got a polygroup on this side, you've got a polygroup around the edges, you've got a polygroup on the front. In fact, I might even go so far as to make individual polygroups for each of these sides. But most of the time you're seeing this kind of thing, it might be a base of something. You might be seeing it, say, in this direction. So you could make everything except, say, the bottom the same polygroup, and that way any kind of texture information along this front that wraps around the side would not have any seams in it. In this thing's case, I think it's, for what I'm going to show you, I think it's just fine as it is, and if it's not, well, we'll readjust it. So first of all, we'll get out of perspective here just in case. I don't think that's going to change anything, but it might. And then I'm going to UV unwrap this thing. So I'm going to come up to my Z plugin, UV master, and I'm going to set symmetry on and polygroups on, and then just unwrap it and let it do its thing. And then we can check that down here in the morph UVs. so we can see kind of what it's done. Yeah, see, it's broke. It actually did some splitting of those in polygroups. Anyway, let me show you. Let me undo that, and let me undo the unwrap, and I can show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do is we'll use Control Shift and just make everything except that bottom visible or invisible, and then Control Shift Alt and drag to invert that, and then Control W to set those to all to the same blue. And that blue is probably too similar to the other, so let's do that. Yeah. So now I'm going to do hold Control Shift and click out here, bring that back. Now I've got a polygroup on the bottom, and polygroup top and sides are all the same. So that way, when I run the unwrap and we take a look at that, you'll see that it has kind of altered stretched them out a little bit, so that these things, if you put any kind of texture information on this, it would wrap around the edge. All right, so I'm going to do that. Again, depending on what you're doing, what kind of textures you're using, this may change. You may need to change that. All right. Next, what I want to do is come down to here and load in a texture map again. So let's go in and we'll again just import that leaf, and you can see that, okay, well, it's got texture coordinates and things are, the leaf is showing up, but it's not exactly planar projected on there like I might want it. And that's where these, under the UV map rollout, if you come down to the create part of that, you'll see these UVP, UVC, UVS, etc. And UVP, if you mouse over that, is UV planar. That's typically what you want. You just want to planar project that leaf on there. So if you click that, you see it's planar projecting the leaf onto this thing. Yeah, and you can see I should probably go in and adjust that image so that these green pixels are touching the edge of it, so they're kind of streaking down the side. But for the most part, this works okay. And you can even then come in down here to the transparency. Maybe bump that to 1, and see that makes it transparent. You could even turn on double. You can kind of see it like that. So that's how. And then this is all still geometry. You could come in and use your so if I wanted to use, say, just my standard brush on that. Let's make the draw size really big. Kind of warp all that around. You can. It's all doing what you want. Or you could actually leverage some things with this kind of geometry. Notice that I also have the ability from the UV maps here to adjust the number of repeats. So I could take that to say 4 in that direction, and then say 4 in this direction, and now I've got these repeating maps on it. You could also UV tile these, and what that does is that puts one of these for every polygon on this thing, and if you hold down Control over these, it'll tell you what's going on. It'll put one of these for every tile. In this case, I've still got the repeat that's set to 4, so let's take that to 1, and then 1 here. So it's applying one of those leaves to every tile. So this is kind of cool as it is, but then you can do some really interesting things if you've got a texture that sort of works with this kind of geometry. For example, here in Photoshop, let me close this thing out. I've made a tile like this, where I've got this. It's black here, so this is all going to be transparent, and then I've got some information out here on the border of this thing, so that back here in ZBrush, if I switch to that, let's import a frame border, you can see that it's with that UV tile texture, tiling to every polygon on there. So, and now all I have to do is again adjust my transparency, set that to 1, and now I get this kind of cool frame-like thing. And that works in Keyshot. And also, this is all still deformable. For example, I could come into my twist and sort of twist that thing around. And if I render it and if I bridge it over to Keyshot, I'm hoping the video will let me kind of finish this up. Maybe. And let me pause the video while Keyshot's deciding what it's going to do. Oh, here it comes. No, maybe. All right, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so there that is, as you would expect in Keyshot. So you can do some really interesting things depending on how you're using that text, how you're using your textures and the transparency of it.